Hello everyone. Thanks for joining in. Today we'll be having an overview on data leakage, which is a very important topic in machine learning, and also we'll have a look of this L1 and L2 regularization in terms of how do we interpret model. All right, so let's get started. First of all, let's actually understand like what exactly do we mean by data leakage. So meanwhile, can someone confirm my voice is audible like properly?
Yeah, sounds fine.
Okay, perfect. So data leakage. So like in part two of this assignment, you might have seen like whenever we are posing some restrictions on our model, like we are saying maximum depth should be 5 or something like that. So we observe that the model actually underfits the data. And how do we know that? We see that the training error becomes large, or we can see the training accuracy goes down, and so does the testing accuracy. Whenever we don't include any kind of restriction and we just train the model for sufficient amount of time, we observe that the model tends to overfit the data. In that case, it actually learns the training data very well, and its ability to generalize actually goes down. So in that case, we observe that the training accuracy becomes high, but the testing accuracy becomes low. But one strange thing that you might have observed in this assignment is that both the training accuracy and the testing accuracy are almost 99%. Now, in that case, can we say that our model is doing very well? And like, how do we decide that we are able to get data leakage or not? So in this assignment, if we practically deploy our model for real life data that the model has never ever seen before, fresh data, we observe that the model actually performs very poor. Like, it gets an accuracy of 60%, 70%. Then we have to ponder upon the fact, like, where are we going wrong? Because according to us, the testing accuracy and training accuracy, the things we have learned in class, both are high. So let me give you a simple example of data leakage. For example, you have 100 rows of data, okay, and let's suppose there are 20 training examples wherein there are some missing values in some features. Now, obviously, we cannot drop those missing values, because if we drop that thing, then there will be a reduction of training examples by 20%. So what I do is I simply use imputation techniques. That means, I can replace those NaN values by either the mean of the entire column, or maybe the highest occurring value, or maybe the median, or maybe the forward fill, or anything like that. Let's say we use the mean of that thing. So those 20 training examples, in their NaN values, in place of those NaN values, I will be having the mean of the entire data set. After I do this thing, I split the data set into 20-80%. Now there is a possibility that those 20 examples where the mean of the entire data is present, some of the examples will be going for the training set, and some of the examples will be a part of the testing set. Now what happens in data leakage is we have given some information about the testing set in the training set. So in a way, there is no difference between the training set and testing set anymore. So similarly, let's suppose the model performs very well on training set, naturally it will perform equally good on the testing set. So that is how data leakage occurs. So how do we avoid that? So the simple thing would be, like, in case of less amount of data, try to split the data first and then go with the imputation. So once you split the data into xtrain and xtest, try to impute the values in xtrain using the mean of the examples in xtrain, and similarly go with the same with xtest. In this case, like, we have first of all imported all the libraries, and then we have read the data set. So that's bike.csv, which is basically the sales of the bikes. Now here we can observe, like, with the help of this data.info, we can actually print the data type of each of the features. So we can see, like, it is int, it is an object, it is, all of these are like float something, and we can see like how many non-null values are there. So we can see, like, total we have 365 entries, and we can observe that there are non-null counts are 365 in all of these. So in a way, we can actually say that there are no null values. Another way to check that is we can also use isNA.sum. So we can see, like, for every column we have no null values. Now here the interesting fact is, if you add these two columns, for example casual and registered, you can get this final value of count, that is how many bikes are getting sold. For example, if you go to a shopkeeper and you ask for an Excel sheet of their particular sellings, and basically what they actually generally do is they actually combine two columns to form a final column. So this thing can be done in Excel sheet itself. Now, since these two columns add up to get the last column, we need to drop at least one of these columns, because if we don't do that, that is also something called data leakage. Because if I have these two columns, I really don't care about all of these features. I can simply add that up. And in that case, we don't actually require machine learning. We can simply add them up. So that's the reason I have said, like here, drop the values, for example, just a second. Yeah. So that's why it was being asked to drop either of this casual or registered. So let's actually go through the notebook. Now, the next part of the code says print out the unique values of the features, these and these. So these are categorical features. So just by using the word unique, so this thing works on a data frame. So we can actually see like these are the unique values. And for year, we can observe that the unique value of year is 2016. That is, all the examples belong to the same year. So in a way, we actually don't require this particular thing anymore. And also, if you observe, there is a thing called ID. So in ID, we can observe that it's basically continuously increasing numbers. So in a way, we also know that this particular feature is not at all needed. So we'll be removing that thing up. So we can actually print the shape of the data, so we can actually see. So right now we discussed like ID is actually no longer needed because it presents no information to deliver. So that's why we just drop it. We imply axis equals to 1. So we actually drop that entire column. Now we can see like from 18 features, we came out to 17 features. Now we can one-hot encode the categorical columns. In this case, we had season and weather. So for season and weather, we can see like we had 4 values here, and for weather, we had 3 values. So that's the reason we go for one-hot encoding. So one way to go for this thing is we can use pandas.getDummies function. You can specify the data frame where the changes need to take place. So this is basically an in-place method. You don't need to drop anything else. Just this single line of code will, replace everything in the data frame itself. Now you can see like, 5 extra features have come because we have used encoding. Now here we know like to avoid data leakage, because we know like if I simply add this casual and registered, I can get this number. So that's the reason I need to drop at least one of them. So that's the reason here we have dropped casual. So while training, so for X example, I have dropped both C and T. The reason we have dropped C and T is because that's a target variable. And then I've dropped casual too along axis 1. That is like in this direction, I've dropped the entire column. For this CNT thing, I've actually taken that to be in the Y, that is the target variable. Now, this particular thing is like most of you were having some problem in this, like why have we taken this thing explicitly? So this thing I'll be explaining in the later part of the video, why have we done this thing. Here I have done nothing. I've just made a list of the columns. So I have used the columns attribute in a pandas data frame object, and I've just taken up the list of that. And we can see like right now we have all of these things here. Next thing is like we can apply scaling to the values. Now we can observe like almost all of these values are like numerical. So sometimes people, what they do is like they can specify like data of, for example, we are going with this particular number. For example, temperature. So in that case, you can actually go for data and then you can write in quotes temperature, and then you can scale this value independently. But for example, sometimes people, what they do is they can scale the entire X in one go. Like you can, pass this entire X to the scaling thing, and scaling works perfectly well. But once you do this thing, what actually happens is the entire X gets converted to a NumPy array. Earlier it was a pandas data frame, now it becomes a NumPy array. All right. Now, once I do this, so I'll observe that these values are lost, like these names are lost. By default, it will name them as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And since we are going for the visualization later, I need to have the name of these, the columns. That is the reason I have mentioned this train underscore columns, like list of these values. Now here, whenever we need to make, convert a NumPy array into a pandas data frame, I need to specify this thing. I just need to explicitly typecast it. So pd.data frame of X, and then I need to specify the name of the columns. If I don't specify, by default, it will start from 0, 1, 2, 3. That's why I've used this columns. And then you can see like all the values are scaled, and you can observe like since year was having minimum value 2016 and maximum value 2016, so all the values get zeroed out. Then we can actually use this train test split. I think this thing should be clear to you by now. And then we can see like this is the shapes of the training and testing data. We then instantiate an object of linear regression, and then we fit it on the training data. And then we actually do the prediction, and we take up the R square score. So basically, R square score is nothing but it ranges from 0 to 1, and it basically tells you how much better your model is doing compared to mean. Like for example, if your model always predicts the mean of the data, for example, if the mean of the data is 10, so if I make an equation y equal to 10, simple equation, so compared to that mean, how much better is your model doing? So 0.986 is comparatively like it's very good. So I can say it's going very well. Similarly, on testing data also we can observe almost it's same. Now, based on this, I might think like, okay, so I have built a perfect model. Now I'm going to rock and like it's going to work very well. So let's see what actually happens later. So this is one custom function that we have built, and you were not supposed to do any changes here. So we have just tried to plot the coefficients of the weights. Now in this thing, I have just passed the model and train columns. Now, if your, for example, if your this X is already a pandas object, instead of calling this train underscore columns, you can also pass X dot columns. So that columns becomes an attribute of pandas object. So that would also work well. One of the most important reason is how to interpret the model. We actually don't care about the accuracy, whether it's 100, it's 90, it's 80, or we don't even care like what's the outcome we are getting. We try to interpret the model, because whenever we go for a shopkeeper and for example we make a machine learning model for them, he's not interested to know what your model is giving 37 as output or 50 as output or 70 as output. He wants to know like, where do I need to focus? What are the important features where I need to focus so that my sales could shoot up? In that case, one of the most important thing is to scale the values, because if you don't scale the values, then these coefficients will be set up accordingly. For example, if a value is very much high, for example, if the value is like almost the range is like in starting from 10,000 to 50,000, in that case, that particular value might be multiplied with some very small number like 10 power minus 4, 10 power minus 3. So naturally we'll say that the impact of that particular parameter will be low. Compared to that, for example, if there is one parameter like age ranging from 0 to 100, in that case we might need to multiply that particular number by 30 or 40. So multiplying one feature by 30, multiplying the other feature by 0.001, so you will think like age has higher impact than that, which is not true. So that is why, to make everyone standard, we do the scaling. Now here we can observe that this particular column registered has the highest impact. So if I have registered, so 4,473 is the coefficient. So that means 1 unit increase in this particular value will have an impact factor of 4,000. Also we can observe like temperature also has like the second highest impact, and then we can see like almost all of them have some impact but not that much. And we can see like this particular year has no impact because the value is simply 0. Had we not scaled the value and we had kept 2016 as it is, then there is a possibility for year there might have been some higher value. Next is like the important concept of cross validation. This we have seen in the class, so I'll just discuss this thing briefly. Cross validation is, suppose we have less amount of data. For example, you have collected some data from a shopkeeper and he has almost like 1,000 rows, that's it. You don't have any fresh data, you don't have anything, just by training. So naturally whenever you do a split, you can actually train your model. So what happens is it uses the entire training set and it trains the model and tells you the accuracy on training step. If you want to go a one step extra, and if you want to say during training only, what can I expect the accuracy on testing set to be? Just an estimate, nothing else. In that case, I make use of this k-fold cross validation. If I am saying k equal to 10, what actually happens is the training data that you are giving, it will be divided into 10 different parts. The first part will be hold out as a testing set, and the model will be trained on the 9 remaining parts. And after training on the 9 remaining parts, it tries to validate on that first part. And basically in the next iteration, it takes up the second part as the testing set and the remaining 9 parts as the training set. So likewise, it keeps on repeating. So in this way, we are able to achieve like, yeah, our initial motive was to train the model and training thing that we are doing. Apart from that, we are able to get an estimate, like how much can we get, like generalizability on training set. How much are we able to do that? So in this case, we can see like for the first thing, we are getting 96.8 accuracy. For like taking out second part of the data as testing data, we are able to get 99.9 and so on. So for the mean thing, we can go for this thing. So mean comes out to be 98 and standard deviation comes out to be this. So we can say that the generalizability on training set is coming on to be almost 98 plus minus this thing. So this plus minus actually plays an important role. Now, next thing, many of you were asking like we had dropped the column id like initially, why didn't we drop this column year there also? Okay, so we might have dropped it directly, but for example, if you have around 10,000 features in your data set, you can't individually drop everything. In that case, we go for variance thresholding. So if x is a pandas object, you will be noticing something like this. If your x is a numpy object, you will notice only one particular number. So make sure that your x is a pandas object. Here we can see like almost everyone is having some of the variance, but we can see the variance of year is 0. So basically, if the variance basically tells how much your data is varying. So basically, if your data is not varying at all, so there is no point in keeping that data. So that is why what we have done is there is something called a variance threshold in model selection. So sklearn model selection. Here I have kept a threshold of 0.01. So whichever column has this variance less than 0.01, that will be removed. In this case, year is the only one that gets removed. And once I fit this on the X train, so what does fit do? Fit basically finds out the information about all of this thing. Right now, nothing has been done. Once I do the transform, I can actually remove those features from the training and test set. Here, there is something called get support function. So once I use the get support function, so I can see like these are the selected features, like till here. And I can also see if I use not of this particular thing, I can see like which of the features are removed. So I can see that this particular feature here gets removed. So I think that's one good thing that we have done automatically. Then basically we have to remove this particular feature from our training list also, because the training list that we have created, it's static in nature. So we need to remove this thing from there also. So that's why I mentioned this code, so that this thing gets removed from the train list, which is our list of columns. Then once this thing is done, we have only done fit. Till now, nothing has been done. We have to transform this thing using this particular object. So I do this transform. So by transform, what happens is in X train, this particular feature here gets dropped, and similarly I have to do the same for X test. Now, let's actually understand like why do we need to use L1 norm and L2 norm in terms of how to interpret the model. In terms of underfitting and overfitting, that will be taken up by Raghav in the next part. Let's actually see how to understand like model. For example, if you think your model is doing well, but if you think that your model is getting overtrained on training data, or it is learning the training data very early or very fast, so you want to see whether your model is actually learning the data or it is able to generalize. We want the model to generalize. For example, if I give you a quiz of 10 questions and if I tell you these are the answers, and I ask you to read the quiz 10 times, and you read the quiz 10 times, so next time if I want to see how well you are doing, I will definitely not ask the same question, because if I ask the same question and you give the answer, I will be having a doubt in my mind whether you answered by learning that thing or you by hearted that thing. Simple. So या तो रट्टा मारा या फिर समझा. So that is what we need to see कि हमारा model रट्टा नहीं मार रहा. It should be able to understand things. So Lasso, what does this thing do is, basically Lasso is a form of linear regression only. Only thing is, in the loss function, we add one more term, which is lambda upon 2m times summation of the absolute value of weights. We want the weight values not to become too high. We want that the weight should be distributed like almost in an equal manner. So we want the values. So the model, the rule of machine learning is, the simpler the model is, the better it is to use. So if you have two models, one is very complex and giving you an accuracy of 90, one is simple and giving you an accuracy of 90, we always go for simpler ones. In this case, since we are using L1 norm, which is summation of the absolute values of weights, to drive that factor down, we have to ensure that weights become closer to 0, because the only way to minimize a modulus function is to ensure that the weights or the values gets driven closer to 0. Here, Once I use this lasso regression, I use it on the training set and testing set, and I observe like almost the result is same. Now, when I visualize the thing, here comes the most important part. I can see like certain features like weather cloud has become 0, season summer has become 0, season autumn has become 0, promotion level has become 0, field temperature and week holiday and holiday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 features got eliminated. Simple as that. And that is what the beauty of lasso regression is. It drives the weight towards 0. So the smaller values are actually driven towards 0. In that case, we can obviously see like it acts as a natural feature selection. So I've basically written this down. So this model is much more, interpretable than the baseline linear regression model. Here we can actually see like these particular columns, even if they are removed, it's not going to make a much difference. For example, if the shopkeeper asks you, like due to this COVID lockdown, my workforce is less. What are the factors I should focus more on? So in that case, you can actually directly tell him like, just don't focus on these factors at all. They are not needed. Just focus on the remaining factors. Now, basically, let's suppose the shopkeeper asks you, what if I have enough workforce and I can focus on each of the individual features? I really don't want them to get eliminated. I want to keep every feature into action. In that case, we have something which is most commonly used, that is called L2 normalization. Why do we need L2 normalization is because the training data set that you have obtained, it is very small and if you are deleting some features just based on your training data performance, there is a possibility like while you get a completely new data, these features might hold some impact. Directly making them 0 is not going to help you at all. So that's why we want them not to become 0, but something like more than 0, like they should not be eliminated. In that case, we make use of ridge regression. So ridge regression is nothing. It makes use of L2 norm. Thus, basically, it's a modification of lasso regression. Instead of using, lambda by 2m times the summation of absolute values, I will make use of lambda upon 2m times summation of the square of the weight values. Now, what's the biggest difference between taking modulus value and taking square values? Here, what happens is the main motive of ridge regression is again to drive the weight values to lower values. But ridge does not focus on, making the smaller values converge to 0. It focuses on bringing the bigger values, smaller. Like in simple terms, I can say like if some value gets lesser than 1, the task of ridge regression is almost done, because if I get a value of half, squaring it will become 1 by 4, again squaring it will become 1 by 16 and so on. So its focus is to, drive weights like less than 1, or basically it tries to get the weights in smaller values. And features generally don't get eliminated to that extent compared to L1 norm. So again, the same thing, you have to just give alpha. So alpha is basically this lambda thing that we have learned, like Vipul sir told in the class, lambda upon 2m. So alpha, if I'm saying 1, so that means I am giving 1 weightage to that thing. If I give alpha equal to 3 or 4 or 5 or higher value of alpha, then what I'm doing is in the loss function, I am focusing more towards the weight values. So higher the value of alpha becomes, higher the weightage is of the second term, which is like focused on the weight values. So in simple words, if I have higher value of alpha, that will imply that my weight functions needs to go lesser and lesser. So higher value of alpha implies that my weight value should go down. Here also we have done the same thing, so we don't observe much of a difference. But when we do the coefficient plot again, here we can observe like almost everything has some weightage. Nothing has been eliminated, simple as that. So that is like the use of ridge regression. It tries to distribute the weights in such a way like, every feature gets something. For example, this promotion level external is getting 0.1152. Almost this is negligible. Even the this weekday is getting 0.04. Almost these are negligible values like this, even this minus 1.701. But still something is there. Like if we go for same compared to lasso, these small values have simply been eliminated. So this entirely depends on how do we interpret the model. How do we want to interpret the model? So like in the last thing I have given, like there is a possibility like whenever we get a new data, or let's suppose the shopkeeper now says, I am not going to fill this registered value. for example, if I'm not going to give this registered value, like how well is your model going to perform? In that case, what will happen is our model is going to perform at its worst. The reason being because the highest value is for registered, and if I drop this particular thing, and basically during the testing phase, if I give 0 as the input for register, because I really don't know how many people have registered, in that case the model is not going to work well. So ultimately, the gist of this entire exercise was to make you realize that it is not always about doing model.fit, model.predict, model.score, and just seeing and then feeling okay, it's going good. It's always about how do we interpret the model, like what things are we able to learn from the model, like how exactly are we going to do. For example, if you did not drop this casual feature, and for example, if you maintain this casual register, you will get an accuracy of 100 in both. Like straight away, like even if you just train for like larger learning alpha 0.01, something like that, you do whatever you want to do, still you'll observe that the accuracy is going to be 1.0, 1.0 in both the case. Reason being because you have given these two features, and by simply adding these two features, you can get the final outcome. So in that case, if the shopkeeper wants to interpret like what will happen if I remove both of these, so try to remove both of these and again train the model. Although the accuracy will be low, maybe like when I tried it came out to be around 78, but still I think that model is much better because I am able to interpret. Like the shopkeeper does not need to take into account how many people have registered and how many casual bikes have been sold. If I remove those two things, for example, due to this COVID lockdown, there are no sales at all. At least the shopkeeper will know, provided that I have removed this registered and casual, or both are 0, how will other factors, like have some impact on my final outcome? Like how many sales am I able to do based on other factors? In that case, interpreting the model will actually help the shopkeeper understand like where does he need to focus. So that is how things work out. So yeah. And one last thing, like if you have probably gone through this thing, like I've seen like most of the people don't attempt this further fun thing, but I think I will just do this one. There is one thing called RFE, that is recursive feature elimination, and this thing is something which Vipul sir has taught in the like the latest class. This is like one of the simplest things to do, but this thing, like whenever you're going for some Kaggle competition or anything, the simplest thing that I do is I just run this thing because I don't need to do anything at all. You don't need to apply your mind to select which features. As the name suggests, it's recursive feature elimination. It does it automatically. What I have to do is I need to just run a loop through all the features, and what happens actually is it works like from backwards. I will fit the model. I will provide the I. So this is basically an sklearn function. The value of I basically implies how many best features to select. If I say I equal to 1, that means eliminate, like I have total 20 features. So that will mean eliminate 19 features and just keep one feature, and then tell me what is the accuracy of the model. If I say I equal to 5, that means eliminate 15 features and just keep top 5. If I say I equal to 19, that means eliminate only one feature and keep top 9. So coming back to this, so what I'll do is I'll just run a simple for loop in like from 1 to n-1 features. Why? Because if I remove all the features, then there is nothing. And then what I'm doing is I'm fitting the model on X train and Y train. I'm doing the transform. By doing the transform, I'll actually be able to see which all features are getting removed. So in this loop, I have actually printed the R-square score for everything. So if I just keep one feature, one best feature, I will get the R-square of 0.02. If I keep, and the R-square score should be closer to 1 for us to say that it's very going good. Now here I can see like if I have 8 features, 8 best features, I can have an R-square of 0.7, which is pretty much good. And if I keep on going, like I can observe like for 15, it is 0.75, and after this, it becomes 0.754, and then it keeps on decreasing. In that case, my model is trying to tell me like just keep these 15 features. After that, this R-square value is going down. So after this thing, I have to again call this RFE. Instead of calling a loop, I will just specify 15. And then I can actually see by the support attribute what all features are getting selected. So I can see like holiday, working day, these all features are getting selected. And if I see what all features are getting removed, Now I can see like promotion level, promotion type, this thing are getting removed. And if you carefully notice, these are the exactly those features which got removed via L1 normalization in lasso regression. So the weights which were being driven to zero in this lasso, like those were the only features which got removed via RFE. So in a way, so this is like something that you were supposed to do on your own. And one last point that I would like to mention for this session is like one thing should be clear. Like if I have more number of features, for every feature I'm trying to train the model again and again. So 15 times I'm training the model. So that is why. So in this case, I'm trying to train the model 18 times. And like, for example, if you have like 100 or like 1,000 features and almost 10,000 training examples, doing this will take approximately a lot of time. For example, 2-3 hours. So sometimes these kind of things do work for smaller competitions or something where you don't have that much of expertise. But like if you have larger number of features and stuff, then you have to go for like expertise into this domain knowledge. So that's it. So I think based on this thing also you would have got a thing. And apart from this, like you could have also gone for this correlated things like scatter plot. So like if two features are highly correlated, so this like field temperature and this particular column temperature, now these two are highly correlated. Like if one increases, the other also increases. In that case, we can actually draw one of these two. So like these are some things like we will be learning in the coming parts. So yeah, so I think that's it from my side. If